My name is Alyssa Carter, 28 years old, and the night my boyfriend told me, "If you don't like me partying with my exes, that's a you problem," was the night I realized silence could be louder than screaming. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just said quietly, "You're right. I just solved it." Then I picked up my keys, walked to the bedroom, and started packing. That's where it began and ended. But before I get to that moment, let me rewind. Because stories like this don't explode overnight. They burn slowly hidden beneath laughter, love you texts, and fake peace. You don't wake up one day and decide to leave someone you once imagined a life with. You just reach a point where the pretending stops working. At 28, I thought I was doing everything right. I had a steady career as a software engineer, quiet life, stable income, the kind of rhythm that people call boring until they realize how peaceful it actually is. My boyfriend Ryan was 26 and worked in marketing. He was the opposite of me in every way, charismatic, magnetic, the kind of man who could walk into any room and have everyone laughing within minutes. We met through mutual friends 3 years ago. I was drawn to his light, his spontaneity. He said I grounded him. For a while that felt like balance, until it started to feel like I was the anchor holding him back. At first, his social life didn't bother me. I believed in space independence. But as months turned into years, the same names kept popping up: Jenna, his college ex, and Melissa, his high school sweetheart. They weren't ghosts of the past. They were fixtures of his present. Weekend parties, club outings, old friends' dinners, where everyone somehow had a shared romantic history. I tried to be understanding. "They're just friends," he'd say. "You're overthinking it." But it's funny how the line between friendly and flirtatious blurs when you're scrolling through tagged photos at midnight. His arm around Jenna, both smiling too closely, captioned "Old flames, new memories." The first time I brought it up, I kept my tone calm. "Ryan," I said, "I don't want to sound insecure, but it's hard watching you hang out with exes all the time. It makes me uncomfortable." He didn't even look up from his phone. "You're insecure, Alyssa. That's on you. I'm not doing anything wrong." That line stayed with me. The casual cruelty of it. Because it wasn't insecurity, it was self-awareness. I was watching the man I loved prioritize validation over respect. Still, I let it go. Again and again. He'd cancel plans with me for group nights only for those nights to include Jenna or Melissa. He'd come home late smelling of perfume and cheap whiskey saying, "Relax, we just danced. You're always so tense." And I'd smile tightly, burying the ache. Tell myself that love means patience, that maturity means compromise. But compromise shouldn't feel like erasure. One Friday night, I was coding a big project while he was out celebrating some friend's birthday. I stayed up waiting, laptop open, lights dim, the room humming with quiet. When he finally stumbled in around 3 a.m., his shirt half untucked, he grinned lazily. "Had a blast with the crew," he mumbled, collapsing on the bed without a kiss. The next morning, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message preview lit up the screen. "Jenna last night was epic. Let's do it again soon." The word sat there like poison. I didn't touch his phone, just stared at it long enough to feel my stomach twist. Later, when I asked him about it, he laughed. "God, you're jealous over a text. Jenna's my friend. We were just reminiscing. You need to chill." He always said that. You need to chill. And I always did, until I didn't. Months of small betrayals built into something heavy and invisible. I stopped recognizing myself, stopped laughing the same way, stopped sleeping deeply because even dreams started to feel unsafe. I remember one night vividly. We were sitting in the living room, my furniture, my plants, my books stacked neatly, while he scrolled through his phone. His screen flashed with a picture of Melissa clinking glasses with him, both of them tagged by friends at some rooftop bar. I inhaled slowly. "Ryan, this can't keep happening. I've supported your social life, but this posting pictures with your exes like that, it's disrespectful." He set his phone down, sighed dramatically, and crossed his arms. "Alyssa, we've talked about this 100 times. Jenna and Melissa are part of my circle. You can't control who I'm friends with. If that's a problem, it's not my fault. It's yours." That tone, the superiority wrapped in fake calm, made me feel small in my own home. But instead of arguing, I just stared at him, every memory rewinding in my head. The countless nights I'd stayed home waiting. The skipped career opportunities to be his emotional support system. The dinners alone. The way he'd roll his eyes whenever I voiced hurt. Then I said it. "You're right, Ryan. It is a me problem." He blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "Exactly," he started, smug. "Finally, you're seeing. I just solved it. His face froze confusion, flickering behind his confidence. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag, and started folding clothes. What are you doing? He demanded, his voice rising. Packing. You're being dramatic. No, I said, zipping the bag. I'm being done. He followed me to the door, his tone slipping from irritation to disbelief. You're going to throw away 3 years because of your insecurity? No, I said, meeting his eyes. Because of your disrespect. He scoffed. You'll regret this, Alyssa. You'll end up alone, boring as ever, while I'm out actually living. Then leave, I replied softly, but not with me. I walked out. No tears, no yelling, just a steady pulse in my chest and the sound of my keys jingling in my hand. That night, I rented a tiny downtown studio. Nothing fancy, just quiet. I sat on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and posted a single picture, my new key, resting on my palm. Caption: problem solved. And for the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. No notifications, no arguments, no excuses, just peace. Little did I know that peace was only the calm before his entire world began to fall apart. When I woke up the next morning in my new apartment, the quiet felt unnatural, almost hostile. No sound of Ryan's alarm, blaring too early. No smell of burnt coffee he'd forget on the counter. Just a hollow kind of peace. I sat up on the bare mattress, surrounded by unopened boxes, and for a long time I just stared at the sunlight spilling through the window. It was my first morning without him in 3 years, and for some reason that scared me more than it should have. I tried to distract myself. Unpacked ordered groceries, made a list of things I needed, but even the smallest tasks carried weight. Every item in those boxes told a story, the mugs we'd bought together. The framed photo from a trip that now felt fake, the cardigan he used to say looked too serious. I almost laughed when I folded it neatly and put it in the drawer. Serious was starting to sound like freedom. At work, my coworkers didn't notice anything different. I was composed, efficient, the same Alyssa who met every deadline. But inside my mind was a static storm. I kept hearing echoes of Ryan's voice. You're insecure, you're too serious, you're boring. Words that had seemed small in the moment, but left bruises that didn't fade. I opened my phone during lunch and scrolled through social media stupidly, impulsively. His page was active as ever. A new story, a group photo at a club. Jenna and Melissa were both there laughing. Ryan in the center, arms spread wide like nothing had happened. The caption read, "New chapter. No drama, just vibes." I felt something crack quietly in my chest. Not heartbreak exactly, but disbelief. The speed of his detachment. The performance of indifference. It was strange to realize how quickly someone could turn your pain into their aesthetic. I turned my phone face down, took a deep breath, and decided that was the last time I'd look. The following nights blurred together. I'd come home to silence, cook simple meals for one, and fall asleep to the hum of the city outside. Some nights I missed him. Not the man he'd become, but the illusion I'd built around him. The idea of him as someone safe, stable, worth sacrificing for. That version had died long before I left. On the 5th night alone, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Below, the streets glowed gold under passing headlights. I whispered to myself, "You did the right thing." It felt strange saying it out loud, as if I was trying to convince someone else, maybe the version of me who used to wait up for him. The truth was, leaving didn't feel empowering yet. It felt empty. But even emptiness is progress compared to chaos. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no texts. Not from Ryan, not from his friends. The silence that once scared me began to feel sacred. I started running again early mornings before work when the air was cool and the streets were still half asleep. There was something cleansing about the rhythm of it, each footstep pushing the memory of him a little further away. At the office, I volunteered for a complex project, something I'd been hesitant to take on before because Ryan always complained when I worked late. Now I stayed as long as I wanted. One night, while reviewing code, I realized I was smiling. It wasn't happiness exactly, but relief. A lightness I hadn't felt in years. One Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Mia, a mutual friend. "Hey, just checking in. You okay?" I replied simply. "Yeah, actually I am." She sent another text a few minutes later. "You probably don't want to hear this, but Ryan's been out a lot. Same crowd, same chaos. He's acting like nothing happened." I stared at the screen, then typed. He always was good at pretending. Then I muted the chat. Nights got easier after that. I started decorating the apartment's soft lights plants by the window. Small reminders that this space was mine. I learned how to fill my own silence podcasts while cooking background music while showering laughter at small things. I didn't need constant noise to feel alive anymore. But even in peace, a part of me stayed cautious, a quiet readiness, like waiting for a storm that hadn't arrived yet. Because men like Ryan never stay gone for long. They return when their world starts crumbling right after the applause dies. One night while folding laundry, I caught myself remembering his words again. "You'll regret this, Alyssa. You'll end up alone, boring as ever." I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from knowing something he didn't. Solitude isn't loneliness, when you finally escape someone who confused chaos with love. By the third week, work felt different. I was performing better, sleeping deeper, even laughing with coworkers more. People started saying I looked lighter. They didn't know the half of it. Every morning before I left for work, I'd glance at the keychain hanging by my door, the one from my Problem Solve post. It became my small ritual, my reminder that peace doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it's just the quiet click of a door closing behind you. Then, one late Friday evening, as I was winding down after work, Mia called again. Her tone was cautious. "Alyssa, you might want to hear this. Ryan's kind of falling apart. The job, the parties, Jenna, it's getting messy." I leaned back in my chair, a small part of me curious, the rest indifferent. Falling apart how? He showed up drunk at his office event, got into some kind of argument with a client. HR's involved. And Jenna, she's apparently done with him. It's a whole scene. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then quietly, "Guess the vibes ran out." Mia exhaled, almost relieved I wasn't bitter. "You're really okay, aren't you?" For the first time in a long time, I said, "Yeah." After the call ended, I sat in silence again, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I didn't know it then, but that was only the beginning, because Ryan's perfect image, the one he built on charm and ego, was about to crack completely. And when it did, he wouldn't be able to hide behind good vibes anymore. He'd finally have to face what he'd done, and he'd come knocking. But when that moment arrived, I wouldn't be the same woman who once begged him to listen. I'd be the woman who walked away without looking back. A month after I walked out, Ryan's life started cracking like glass under pressure. Not that I was looking for it. I'd stopped checking his socials, muted every mutual friend who couldn't talk about anything else. But information has a way of finding you even when you don't want it. It started with a message from Mia again. "You didn't hear this from me, but Ryan's with Jenna now. Officially." I stared at the text for a long time. I didn't feel the rush of jealousy I expected, just a strange, quiet sadness. Because I'd seen that chapter coming long before it was written. Men like Ryan don't start over, they recycle. Through whispers from mutuals, a clearer picture formed. Ryan had started dating Jenna almost immediately after I left. They were inseparable late nights, bars, weekend trips. Their photos were everywhere, curated perfectly, her laughing, his hand on her waist, captions full of fake joy and half-truths. From the outside, it looked like the dream life he'd always claimed he wanted, wild, spontaneous, unbothered. But behind that performance, the cracks were already showing. One of our old friends, Tom, ran into them at a party downtown. He told me later, quietly, almost apologetic. It was awkward. They were arguing the whole night. He got jealous over some guy talking to her. She stormed out. Everyone saw. I just nodded. That sounded exactly like the man who once accused me of being too controlling. 2 weeks later, rumors turned to facts. Ryan's company held a client event at a rooftop bar, a major deal he'd been bragging about for months. He showed up late drunk and ended up shouting at one of the clients after they mentioned seeing his girlfriend with someone else last week. Someone recorded it. The video made its way around his office. By Monday, HR was involved. By Friday, he was temporarily suspended for unprofessional conduct. Mia sent me a screenshot of a private post from one of his coworkers. "When your cool guy act doesn't work in real life." For the first time in months, I laughed not from spite, but disbelief. How fast arrogance turns to ash. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat or comment. I just went on with my life, work, gym, quiet mornings, peace. But the universe has a twisted sense of timing. One evening, while I was grocery shopping, I ran into Jenna. She was in the wine aisle, eyes tired, makeup smudged, like she'd been crying in the car. She froze when she saw me. For a second, I thought she might just turn around and walk away, but she didn't. She walked right up to me, her voice low. "Alyssa Wright." I nodded. "Yeah." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "I know you probably hate me, but you were right about him." I raised an eyebrow. "About what exactly?" Everything she said. The jealousy, the manipulation, the lies. He gets angry if I don't answer fast enough. Accuses me of flirting when I talk to male coworkers. It's exhausting. There was no satisfaction in hearing it, just confirmation. I looked at her, not as a rival, but as another woman who fell for the same performance. Then leave, I said softly. Before he convinces you it's your fault. She nodded, eyes glossy. I'm trying. We didn't say goodbye, but that conversation followed me all the way home, because for the first time I realized something. Ryan didn't break me because I was weak. He broke me because I kept believing he was capable of love. Weeks passed. Then came Melissa, the other ex. She'd always been quieter, the type who hovered around his orbit like a backup plan. Mia told me she'd started seeing him again, or maybe helping him. Either way, it ended predictably. He borrowed money from her, Mia said. Told her he'd pay her back after getting a new job. Then ghosted her for 2 weeks. Wow, I murmured. Classic. She's furious. She told everyone. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it, for someone who said I was boring, his life sure had turned into a soap opera. Then came the final blow. Ryan's landlord posted an online notice, one of those public court filings that anyone could see if they knew where to look. Eviction notice. 3 months of unpaid rent. He'd lost his job, burned through savings, and apparently Jenna had kicked him out of her apartment too. The same man who once mocked my structured, predictable life was now couch-hopping between friends. Every so often, I'd hear snippets how he tried starting a freelance consulting business, how he got kicked out of a bar for fighting, how no one wanted to deal with his drama anymore. And through it all, I stayed quiet. Not out of apathy, out of respect for the peace I'd fought to earn. One evening, while finishing a project late, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ryan. Hey, Alyssa. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I miss you. I messed up. I stared at the screen for a long time, then I locked the phone and went back to work. A few minutes later, another buzz. Ryan, please, just one conversation. I'm not okay. This time I deleted the message without replying, because once upon a time I would have dropped everything to save him. Now I finally understood that saving him would have meant losing myself again. The next day, Mia called. He's in trouble, Alyssa. His friends cut him off. Jenna's done. He's saying you're the only one who ever really cared. I didn't respond immediately. When I did, my voice was calm. That used to be true, but not anymore. That weekend, I took a solo trip out of the city, first time in years. A small cabin near the mountains, no signal, no distractions. I watched the sunrise in silence, feeling something settle inside me. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was closure, the kind that doesn't come from anyone's apology, just from peace finally taking up space where pain used to live. I didn't know it yet, but Ryan's messages were only the beginning, because when his charm stopped working and his world fully collapsed, he'd start clawing for the only stability he ever had me. And that was when I'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous part of leaving a manipulative man isn't walking out the door. It's what happens when he realizes you're not coming back. It started quietly, the kind of quiet that feels like the air right before a storm. A month had passed since Ryan's first text, the one I ignored. I thought maybe that was the end of it. But men like Ryan don't go away cleanly. They linger, test boundaries, twist apologies into invitations. The first time he called, I didn't answer. The second time, I muted the number. By the third, I recognized the pattern, desperation disguised as remorse. One evening after work, I was making tea when my phone buzzed again, a voicemail this time. His voice soft, almost broken. Alyssa, please pick up. I know I hurt you. I know I said things I can't take back, but you were the only one who actually cared. Jenna left. Melissa won't even talk to me. I lost everything. I need to see you. Please. He let out a shaky laugh that didn't sound like him. You used to tell me I'd crash one day. Guess you were right. I listened to the message twice, not out of sympathy, but disbelief. The same man who once told me I was too serious was now begging for the stability he'd mocked. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered the nights I cried quietly while he partied with his exes, the way he looked at me like I was the problem for wanting respect. I deleted the message and went back to my tea. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, I got a text, this time from his sister Lisa. Alyssa. It's Lisa. Look, I know things ended badly, but Ryan's not doing well. He's depressed. He's drinking too much. You were the only one who could calm him down. Please just talk to him. I stared at the screen for a long time, my stomach tightening. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this tactic. The guilt trip, the emotional outsourcing, the way families of toxic people try to make their damage someone else's responsibility. I replied politely but firmly. I'm sorry he's struggling, but I can't help him. That's not my role anymore. She left me on read. The following week, the messages escalated. 2 mutual friends, Tom and Mia, reached out separately. Tom, he's trying to get clean. Maybe hearing from you would help. Mia. He says he just wants closure, Alyssa. You could give him that. Closure. The word that always sounds noble until you realize it's just another door for manipulation. I typed back to Mia. If he wanted closure, he should have respected me when I gave him peace. Then I muted both chats. But Ryan wasn't finished. One rainy evening, I got home late from work. My apartment hallway was quiet except for the faint buzz of the elevator light. When I reached my door, I froze. He was there, sitting on the floor outside my apartment, soaked through, head in his hands. Ryan, I said, my voice steady but cold. He looked up, eyes, bloodshot expression, somewhere between relief and shame. Alyssa, thank God. You look good. Can we talk? No. I unlocked the door, keeping my body between him and the entrance. Please, he said, standing now. I know I don't deserve it, but I need 5 minutes. That's all. I shook my head. Ryan, go home. I don't have a home right now. His voice cracked. Jenna's done with me. My landlord kicked me out. I'm lost, Alyssa. Then maybe it's time you start finding yourself instead of looking for someone to save you. He laughed bitterly. Always so cold. You never could just let things go, could you? I met his gaze. You mistook boundaries for coldness. That's why you're standing outside my door instead of inside my life. He exhaled hard, hands shaking. You really don't care anymore, do you? I did, for years. Now I care about me. And then before he could answer, I shut the door. He knocked twice, then 3 times, then silence. I stood there, hand on the knob, waiting for the sound of his footsteps retreating. When it came, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The next day, there were messages again. Ryan, you didn't have to shut me out like that. Ryan, I'm trying to get better. Ryan, I thought you'd be happy to know I'm in therapy. Ryan, why are you so heartless now? Heartless, the same word he used when I walked out. It was almost poetic how manipulators recycle their own lines when they run out of power. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and blocked his number again. That weekend, I met up with Mia for brunch. She looked guilty even before I sat down. You're going to hate me, she said. But Ryan's been talking to people again. He's telling everyone you're cruel, that you abandoned him when he hit rock bottom. I sipped my coffee slowly. Let him. The people who know me don't believe that. I told him to stop, she said quietly. He said you'll regret this one day. I smiled faintly. That line's getting old. Still, the whole thing left a sour taste in my mouth. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from watching someone rewrite the story of their cruelty as your betrayal. That night, I journaled something I hadn't admitted out loud. I don't want revenge. I just want distance so complete that he can't even imagine my existence anymore. But fate doesn't grant peace that easily. 2 weeks later, at a mutual friend's birthday party, the first social event I'd gone to since leaving him, Ryan showed up. I hadn't planned on seeing him. I was laughing with coworkers holding a drink when I felt the air shift, that heavy stillness that precedes confrontation. He walked in, cleaner, sharper, pretending to be composed. When his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered for a second before he recovered. Alyssa, he said softly, as if we were old friends. You look different. I am different, I replied. He chuckled. Can we talk? Just 2 people catching up? I don't owe you that. His jaw tightened. You don't owe me compassion either. No, I said, not anymore. He leaned closer, voice low, so only I could hear. You think you're better than me now? No, I said calmly. I just finally know I'm not less. For a long moment, we stood there in silence, his ego trying to reassemble itself, while mine stayed intact for the first time in years. Then he turned and left, slamming the door behind him hard enough that the music briefly skipped. That night, I went home feeling shaken but strangely powerful, because I'd realized something vital. Closure doesn't come from hearing I'm sorry. It comes from seeing the person who hurt you and feeling nothing. And while Ryan's storm was far from over, mine had already passed. 6 months after that night, the world had shifted again, only this time it wasn't mine that was spinning. I'd built something new out of the quiet, a life that actually fit me. Work was thriving. I'd been promoted to lead engineer on a new project. I'd started painting again on weekends, hiking more, saying yes to things that didn't drain me. And then there was Ethan. We met on a group hike Mia invited me to. He was calm in the way that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind of man who listens more than he talks. No bravado, no chaos, just warmth that felt steady instead of suffocating. When we started dating, I told him about Ryan early on, not to vent, but to be honest. He didn't flinch. He just said, sounds like you did the hardest thing you left when it would have been easier to stay. That was the moment I realized I was finally with someone who saw leaving as strength, not failure. Meanwhile, Ryan's story was unraveling faster than even I could have imagined. Mia tried to spare me the details at first, but they found me anyway. Little whispers, fragments from mutual friends. He'd been fired from another job after missing deadlines and arguing with his supervisor. He'd tried to start a podcast about self-growth, but it flopped after 2 episodes. And then there were the rumors about his drinking getting kicked out of a bar, showing up at his sister's place, shouting that no one cared. His "I'm in therapy" claim had been another facade. He'd gone twice, then stopped when the counselor called him out for avoiding responsibility. Every update used to sting a little, not because I missed him, but because I couldn't believe how blind I'd been to his self-destruction. But slowly that sting turned into distance. His name became just another story I used to know. Then came the night the tables truly turned. Tom was throwing his annual birthday bash, big crowd rooftop venue, half the old circle invited. I almost didn't go. Crowds still made me nervous sometimes, and I knew Ryan might show up, but Ethan insisted gently, "You can't live like you're still avoiding ghosts." He was right, so I went. When we arrived, the night air was warm, filled with laughter, string lights glowing against the skyline. I wore a white dress, simple, elegant, unbothered. Ethan held my hand as we greeted people. I noticed a few surprised glances, maybe they hadn't expected to see me looking so alive. Halfway through the evening, I was laughing at something Mia said when the air changed. The crowd parted slightly near the entrance, and there he was. Ryan. He looked nothing like the man I used to know. Thinner eyes, sunken hair, unkempt under a forced confidence. He spotted me instantly, and for a split second, guilt flickered across his face before the charm kicked in. "Alyssa," he said, approaching with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Wow, you look incredible." I smiled politely. "Ryan." His gaze shifted to Ethan standing beside me. "And you must be—" "Ethan," he said calmly, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you." Ryan nodded, masking irritation with fake civility. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he said to me. "You always hated parties." "I hated the ones that felt like survival," I replied softly. "This one's different." He tried to laugh. "Guess you upgraded, huh?" "I learned," I said. "That's all." For a moment, the air between us felt charged, like the ghost of every argument we'd ever had was hovering there, waiting for someone to reopen the wound. Instead, I turned to Ethan. "Want to grab a drink?" We walked away, leaving Ryan standing alone, holding a cup of nothing. Later that night, I was on the rooftop balcony when he found me again. He looked smaller under the fairy lights, his confidence finally stripped raw. "I messed up, Alyssa," he said quietly. "You were the only person who actually gave a damn about me. Everyone else bailed when things got bad. But you always stayed." I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him, the man who once said I'd end up boring and alone. Now here he was, alone, begging for a conversation. "Ryan," I said, "do you remember the night you told me if I didn't like you partying with your exes, that was my problem?" He looked down. "Yeah, you were right," I said. "It was my problem, but not the way you thought. My problem was that I kept trying to love someone who didn't want to grow up." He swallowed hard. "I've changed." "Maybe, but the version of me who cared doesn't exist anymore." His voice cracked. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He stepped closer, eyes pleading. "I still love you." And for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. No flutter, no ache, not even anger, just calm detachment. I smiled sadly. "If you don't like that, I've moved on, Ryan. That's a you problem." His face fell, the irony not lost on him. "You're really done," he said, almost whispering. I was done the night I walked out. I just didn't realize it yet. I turned and walked back toward the crowd where Ethan was waiting. Behind me, I heard Ryan let out a low, shaky breath, the sound of someone realizing the power they used to have was gone for good. That night, I didn't post any pictures. No captions. No cryptic quotes. I didn't need the world to know that I'd won. Because real closure isn't loud, it's silent, peaceful, final. And somewhere in that rooftop glow, I knew the story had flipped completely. Ryan was the ghost now. 2 years later, I barely recognized the woman I used to be. The one who waited up for unanswered texts. The one who apologized for wanting respect. The one who mistook chaos for love. She's gone replaced by someone quieter, surer, free. It's a Sunday morning in late spring. The sunlight drifts through my kitchen window, catching on the ring that glints softly on my finger. Ethan is humming in the next room, fixing coffee and burning toast again. I tease him about it every weekend, and every weekend he does it anyway, claiming it's tradition. This life isn't flashy or wild, but it's solid. We don't yell to be heard. We don't play games to feel wanted. We build slowly, intentionally, with kindness. When Ethan proposed 6 months ago, it wasn't a grand gesture or some cinematic scene. He just held my hand during a quiet walk along the river and said, "You bring peace into my life. I want to protect that forever." And for the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. Because peace doesn't need fireworks. It just needs to be real. Sometimes when I'm cleaning out old drawers, I'll come across reminders from that past life photos, receipts, small echoes of the woman who thought love meant endurance. Last week, I found a box of old phone chargers and tangled cables. At the bottom, there was an old USB drive labeled Ryan, 2019. I turned it over in my hand, considering it for a moment. Then, without even plugging it in, I dropped it in the trash. Not out of bitterness, out of indifference. Because healing isn't always about confronting your ghosts. Sometimes it's about letting them fade quietly without ceremony. Every now and then, someone from that old circle still mentions him. "Did you hear Ryan moved out of state? He's working odd jobs now. He keeps saying he's sober, but..." Their words trail off, leaving the story unfinished. And that's fine. It's not my story anymore. Once Mia asked if I ever think about reaching out just to see how he's doing. I told her honestly, you don't reopen a wound to check if it's still bleeding. This morning, while watering the plants on our balcony, I looked out at the skyline, the same one I used to stare at from my tiny studio apartment. Back then, the city felt cold and uncaring. Now it feels like home. It's strange how the same view can hold two completely different meanings depending on who you are when you look at it. I used to think leaving Ryan was the end of my story. Turns out it was just the beginning. Sometimes people message me online, old acquaintances, who followed that messy chapter from afar. They say things like, "You were so strong to walk away," or "I wish I had your courage." But the truth is, courage doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like packing a bag in silence, locking a door, and not turning around. Because that's how freedom really starts, not with rage, but with resolve. Last week, Ethan and I visited a small mountain town for the weekend. While he was inside a cafe, I wandered into a little bookstore. In the self-help section, I noticed a familiar title, Healing After Toxic Love. I smiled not because I needed it anymore, but because I finally understood what it meant. Healing isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about remembering it without feeling trapped by it. As we drove home later that day, I watched the mountains fade in the rearview mirror and thought about the quiet irony of it all. Ryan once told me, "You'll regret this. You'll end up alone." But he was wrong. I didn't end up alone. I ended up whole. Now, every time someone asks how I knew leaving was the right choice, I say the same thing. When peace feels unfamiliar, that's how you know you've lived too long in chaos. I glance at Ethan, who's still humming off key while pouring coffee, and I can't help but laugh softly. Because this simple, grounded happiness is the life I used to dream of while sitting in silence next to someone who made me feel invisible. And as the morning sun fills our kitchen, I whisper to myself, not for him, not for the past, but for me. I forgive you, Alyssa, for staying too long, for forgetting your worth, for confusing love with pain. You know better now. The fire burned everything that wasn't real.